This is the Just Japan News Podcast. My name is Kevin O'Shea, and these are some of the top news stories coming out of Japan from the week of February 13th to 19th, 2017. Winter Asian Games kick off with opening ceremony in Sapporo. From the Mainichi Shimbun, February 19th. The Asian Winter Games officially got underway Sunday with an opening ceremony that united winter athletes from the world's most populous continent. With the Winter Olympics just a year and a short distance away in South Korea, the continent's leading winter athletes will use the Games to fine-tune for Pyeongchang 2018. These Games will show the potential of Asia to the world. Katsuhiro Akimoto, head of Sapporo's organizing committee, said, "We have great expectations for the spectacular athletic performances of over 2,000 athletes." The Games run through February 26 and feature more than 2,000 athletes from 31 countries competing in 5 sports, 11 disciplines, and 64 events. The government allowed North Korean athletes and officials to enter the country to take part in the Games despite Japan's entry ban on North Korean citizens. The Sapporo Games will also feature athletes from Australia and New Zealand competing, bringing an Oceania element to the event. The request of the Australian Olympic Committee, the Olympic Council of Asia, and the Sapporo 2017 Organizing Committee agreed to allow athletes from the two countries to take part as guest athletes in individual sports only. They won't be eligible to win medals, but will gain experience by competing against world-class winter sports athletes from the region and in the time zone that will be the same as the Olympics. Japan welcomes China's suspension of coal imports from North Korea. Kyoto News, February 18th. A Japanese government spokesman on Sunday welcomed China's announcement to suspend all North Korean coal imports until the end of this year as part of the strengthened sanctions against Pyongyang in response to its nuclear and missile development programs. The North Korean threat has increased, including its missile development. China's decision is a welcome development, Deputy Chief Cabinet Secretary Koichi Haguuda told a TV program Sunday morning. China's Commerce Ministry said Saturday that the suspension of coal imports was in accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 2321, adopted in November 2016 following North Korea's 5th nuclear test, which was carried out in September the same year. The resolution particularly targeted coal, North Korea's biggest export, much of which is delivered to China. By increasing pressure, we have to help North Korea realize that silly acts will further isolate the country in the international community, Haguuda said, noting that Japan has urged the North to refrain from nuclear and missile development through pressure and dialogue. Executive order that incarcerated Japanese Americans is 75. Associated Press, February 19th. Satsuki Ina was born behind barbed wire in a prison camp during World War II, the daughter of U.S. citizens forced from their home without due process and locked up for years following Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor. Roughly 120,000 Japanese immigrants and Japanese Americans were sent to desolate camps that dotted the West because of the government claimed they might plot against the U.S. Thousands were elderly, disabled, children, or infants too young to know the meaning of treason. 2/3 were citizens. And now, as survivors commemorate the 75th anniversary of that executive order that authorized their incarceration, they're also speaking out to make sure that what happened to them doesn't happen to Muslims, Latinos, and other groups. They're alarmed by recent executive orders by President Donald Trump that limit travel. In January, Trump banned travelers from 7 majority Muslim countries from entering the U.S., saying he wanted to thwart potential attackers from slipping into the country. A federal court halted the ban. Trump said at a news conference Thursday that he would issue a replacement order next week. Orders against Japanese Americans were revoked after the war ended in 1945. They returned to hostility and discrimination, finding work and places to live. A congressional commission formed in 1980 blamed the incarceration on race prejudice, war hysteria, and the failure of political leadership. In 1988, President Ronald Reagan signed a bill to compensate every survivor with a tax-free check for $20,000 and a formal apology from the U.S. government. Ina said that only then did her mother, Shizuko, feel she got her face back, her dignity returned. By then, her father, Itaru, had died. This is a burden we've been carrying, And if we can make that burden into something meaningful that can help and protect other people, then it becomes not so much an obligation, but more as a responsibility, Ina said. Japanese school to use anti-bullying app. NHK, February 18th. An elementary school in Western Japan says it plans to use a software application to prevent online bullying. The app was developed by a US IT firm. It allows victims of cyberbullying or bystanders who witness such acts to report them anonymously to their schools by sending messages or photos with smartphones. The app has about 3 million users around the world. The Tezukayama Elementary School in the city of Nara will begin to use the system in April. It will be the first elementary school in Japan to do so. The school decided to introduce the app as many of its students use cell phones. The school is asking parents to report any incidents of cyberbullying. Principal Takashi Ikeda told a meeting of parents on Saturday that the school wants to collect as much information as quickly as possible. Ikeda said he hopes students and their parents will get together to make the school a safer place. He stressed it is important to spot signs of bullying as early as possible. He said he wants bystanders to speak out as reports will be made anonymous. More than 2,000 cyberbullying cases were reported by elementary school students across Japan in the school year through March 2016. Number of ASDF Scrambles hits record high, NHK, February 16th. Japanese Defense Ministry sources say Air Self-Defense Force jets have been scrambled a record number of times over the past 10 months. Ministry officials say the number of scrambles topped 1,000 from last April through January, and the number is still rising. That's higher than the Cold War record of 944 in 1984. This fiscal year's figure has already exceeded that with 2 months remaining. Scrambles against Chinese jets stood out, accounting for 73% of all cases from April to December. Scrambles against Russian jets came in a distant second with 26% of the total. The number of Chinese jets that have threatened Japanese skies at one time has also increased. More than 10 ASDF jets have been scrambled in one incident. And in a quick update with the site itself for this podcast, JustJapanStuff.com has a new thing happening. The site now has many amazing new contributors and is becoming a Japan go-to spot for information about travel, food, and culture. Bookmark the site and sign up on the right-hand side of the page for email updates to new posts. They will be coming often on many Japan-related topics. Thank you for listening to the Just Japan News Podcast for the week of February 19th. The Just Japan News Podcast brings you the weekly roundup of some of the top news stories coming from Japan and can be found in the feed of the Just Japan Podcast. My name is Kevin O'Shea, the host of the Just Japan Podcast and the Just Japan News Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, you can email me at justjapanpodcast@gmail.com or find me on Twitter at jlandkev. The home of both the Just Japan Podcast and Just Japan News Podcast can be found at justjapanstuff.com. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Please take the time to share it in your social media. Talk to you again next week.